Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting dodo birds and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with you. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, also do that while you're here. Let's get into it. Today we are continuing our Summer Shootaround series that we're going to be doing over a 7-week span. We've already published episodes on Arizona, Arkansas, Baylor, Connecticut, Creighton, and Duke. We're working in alphabetical order. So now we're turning our attention to Florida Atlantic. FAU went 35-4 last season. The Owls were 18-2 in Conference USA, won the league tournament, got a 9 seed in the NCAA tournament, then beat Memphis, Fairleigh Dickinson, Tennessee, and Kansas State to advance to the Final Four. They had a 14-point lead. I don't mean to bring up bad stuff. Had a 14-point lead in the second half of their Final Four game against San Diego State, but they let the Aztecs get back in it, and then Lamont Butler got them at the buzzer. Final score 72-71. That's how the Owls season ended. That's the bad news. Good news is that all 5 starters from that Final Four team are back. The only notable loss is Michael Forrest, who averaged 20.8 minutes per game. He mattered, but every other guy who mattered is back, which is why I have Florida Atlantic ranked 4th in the top 25 and 1. We'll see what Norlander thinks about that next. But first, a word from our partners.
It's time for the best Transformers yet.
There you go.
Is now streaming on Paramount Plus.
This is going to be fun, man. Now that's top-tier manifestation.
Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. Rated PG-13. Now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Okay, Deadleg. Florida Atlantic as a preseason top 5 team. Do you love it? Or do you loathe it?
All right. I'll take what I can take there. Top 5. All right. First things first, as I mentioned to you just before we started taping here, listen, I've got doubts about whether, and about, Tom Izzo ever listening to this podcast. I don't think Jim Larrañaga is, I'm not happy to admit this, but something tells me Jim Larrañaga isn't subscribed to the CBS Sports YouTube channel. Like, I don't know if Rick Pitino's dialing in with regularity, Greg McDermott, Matt Painter, Shaka Smart. Something tells me John Calipari isn't a Spotify subscriber, and that's fine if that's the case. But the one coach I know listens to this podcast and listens to it regularly is Dusty May of FAU. So shouts to him, and not only just him. As he explained to me last season when I wrote a feature on the Owls, his team is basketball obsessed, and multiple guys on that roster literally listen to basketball podcasts all the time. So I say that as prefacing for this. FAU top 5 is out. It feels outrageous. Now I love it. I love that you're doing this, but do we really think we're going to get to Selection Sunday and FAU will be a 1 or 2 seed? Because when you tell me that they are 4th, are you, as a reminder to people that haven't listened to the podcast for a long time, just a reset on this, you've got FAU 4th in your offseason top 25 and 1 going into the season. It's tremendously ambitious, and I do love that. But does that mean, because of what they have, you think that they will be the 4th best team when we get to Selection Sunday or the end of the season? Or do you think, compared to every other roster that's out there, that's just where it lies, and it's not necessarily a predictive ranking of where you think they'll be in March, but rather where you think they set up on the first game of the season?
No, I'm not going to try to split hairs here. I mean, it is obviously based on, this is what I think this roster that has accomplished these things, this is where I believe it should be ranked heading into the season. But do I think Florida Atlantic can be one of the 5 best teams in college basketball next season? Yes. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I think they're going to get a 1 seed or a 2 seed, because the committee will undervalue them. Same way they did last season. If you remember, Florida Atlantic was, I believe, 23rd at KenPom heading into the season. Heading into the NCAA tournament. Okay. 23rd at KenPom heading into the NCAA tournament. They just won their league, a league that had at least 2 other good teams, 2 other top 50 KenPom teams. They won their league tournament, and they got a 9 seed. based on the KenPom numbers, they should have been a 6 seed, and yet they were a 9 seed. So they can be undervalued by the committee and be giving a seed that they don't deserve. But no, I'll stand on it. I think Florida Atlantic can be one of the 5 best teams in college basketball next season. They were one of the best teams in college basketball last season, even if it took a lot of people till the NCAA tournament to notice.
All right, I'll just a little from last season, and then I got something on the season. Last season, an absolute joke. This team was a 9 seed. I said it going into the Selection Sunday. I said they'd be underseeded, and I had hoped that maybe they'd be a 7. Something told me that they were heading toward an 8. They gave them a 9. It's outrageous. They were 31-3, top 20 in every empirical results-based metric. There was no justification for having FAU as a 9. It was a complete joke. I would have had them as a 5 personally, because I thought the record, the dominance, they had 17 double-digit wins last season. And I easily would have had them on the 5 line. Whatever. They broke through and made it to the Final Four after narrowly dodging a loss, by the way, against Memphis in the first round. Sometimes you get this with Final Four teams. Either in that first game or second game, they get a close shave, and then you look up, and lo and behold, they're on the biggest stage in the sport. FAU continued a trend, by the way, that has been going for more than a decade now, where a 5 seed or worse has made the Final Four. A quick refresher on that if you've forgotten over the years. I'll start from all the way back in 2013. That was Wichita State as a 9. Then you had Kentucky as an 8 the next year. Michigan State as a 7. Hughes as a 10 in 2016. In 2017, Frank Martin, South Carolina Gamecocks got there from the 7 line. A year later, Cinderella story, Supreme, Loyola Chicago, an 11 seed. In 2019, Auburn was on the 5 line and broke through to the Final Four. No tournament in 20. UCLA went first 4 to Final Four in 21. And then Carolina, as an 8 seed, made it to the title game. This was also true, by the way, in 2010 and 2011. So we've had an interesting pattern going for a while there. And last season, FAU made it yet again. Yeah, man, and they were almost, you mentioned it before, if not for that Lamont Butler buzzer beater, won the game 72-71, the only do-or-die buzzer beater in Final Four history, where when the shot went up, the team that was shooting the shot was trailing, and if it doesn't go in, they lose. But obviously, SDSU won, and yeah, FAU had a 56-42 lead. I was courtside and was convinced for the entire game, even when the Butler shot. I remember saying this that night we did the Pod GP. I was convinced that the shot wasn't even going in. I thought FAU was going to the title game. So that's a little bit of a stinger. But come on now. Look ahead to this season. Hopes are high. And yes, the pressure and attention around this is going to be interesting because they do bring back almost everyone. Now, you mentioned Michael Forrest. Arguably the most important player on the roster because he was the first recruit to commit to Dusty May and his coaching staff. He was the guy that helped build this out. FAU has averaged 20.2 wins in May's 5 seasons there. Never been below 500. They've been a good program since year 1. Now, last year was just the mega breakthrough, but they lose the guy who kind of helped start it all. Now, everyone coming back is obviously big. And in addition to that, and I'll let you lay out the roster here in just a second, there's also some positive momentum here. I reported this earlier in April where, because of the run, it wasn't just NIL opportunities for the players, which are so well earned, right? Those players are able to make plenty of money, and they had none of them left in the transfer portal, which is an accomplishment unto itself. But the program, the men's program alone, I guess the men's and women's have raised more than $11 million for renovations and upgrades. And I guess some of this gets staggered out, but there's $15 million available to be spent on FAU athletics in the years to come. And I expect that number to go up. I expect, them to implement a new practice facility, probably an impressive practice facility, to be honest, in addition to upgrades to the arena, which I think some were happening this off season and more will come in 24 and 25 there. So, it's a big jump as needed. They're going into a new league. They were in CUSA. Now they're in the American Athletic Conference. Remind the folks about this roster situation, because I think people listening to a July podcast, you're pretty in tune with college hoops, but you might have forgotten a name or two. And FAU's got dudes, man. I do not expect this to be a flash in the pan by any means.
Neither do I. Before we get to the roster, though, just some more numbers from last season to sort of hammer home. Like, this was a good basketball team. I know you'll remember. I'm not sure if other people will. maybe you won't. But there was a point last season we were talking about College of Charleston breaking into the AP poll. And as I said, I'm very happy for Charleston, very happy for Pat Kelsey. But I don't know why that team is ranked. If you're looking for a mid-major team with a great record to rank, the place to look is Florida Atlantic. And then they eventually get into the polls, and they really never stopped being good. They started the season 89th at KenPom and finished 17th. So they were supposed to be a top 100 team. They finished as a top 20. Like I mentioned earlier, they were 23rd heading into the NCAA tournament and finished 17th. So the idea that all these computer numbers are wildly inflated because of a hot tournament run, that's not really it. They moved up 6 spots in the NCAA tournament. Again, they were always good. Finished 22nd in adjusted offensive efficiency, 34th in adjusted defensive efficiency at KenPom. They went 18-2 in a league with 2 other top 50 KenPom teams. North Texas was 31st at KenPom, won the NIT. Florida Atlantic beat them twice. UAB was 47th at KenPom, made the title game of the NIT. Florida Atlantic beat them twice. Florida Atlantic also beat the Florida team that beat Tennessee and Missouri. They beat the Tennessee team that beat Alabama, Duke, Texas, and Kansas. They beat the Memphis team that beat Houston and Auburn. They beat the Kansas State team that beat Kansas, Texas, Baylor, Michigan State, and Kentucky. They only lost to 2 sub-50 KenPom teams all season. That's the same number as UConn. And in the final 10 weeks of the season, they only lost twice by a total of 5 points. Yes, it's true, like you pointed out, they should have, I'll go that far, should have lost to Memphis in the round of 64. You know what else is true? They should have beaten San Diego State in the national semifinals. That's sort of the nature of the NCAA tournament. But even if they would have lost to Memphis in the round of 64, this would still be a preseason top 15 team for me. Yes, it's preseason top 5 because of what happened in the tournament. But like what happened in the tournament happened in the tournament. That should shape the way you think about somebody. And that's why Florida Atlantic is going to be the favorite to win the AAC in its first season in the AAC. And though going to a Final Four is for in back-to-back years is I guess technically unlikely, just because it's technically unlikely for everybody. But they have a team good enough to do it. Evidence being that it's basically the same team from last season minus 1 player, and they did it last season.
Guys coming back. You got Nelly Davis, who had so many bright moments last season, and then an ironic twist. I believe it was Nelly Davis. Had he held the ball for maybe 2 seconds longer, maybe San Diego State doesn't even get a shot off. Nevertheless, great player, great person, inspiring background. He's back. Elijah Martin in the tournament itself, I thought Elijah Martin on balance was the most important player for the Owls. He returns, and the thing, I don't know. I watched FAU probably play. Honestly, I probably watched them play maybe 5 times in the regular season, then watched every game in the tournament. And the balance with this team and the composure, like you've got big Vlad Golden, he's back. Nick Boyd had big moments. Brian Greenlee had plenty of opportunities where he showed his value. Those are the big guys that are back. Then you've got Giancarlo Rosado, who returns, Brendan Weatherspoon, and some of these guys, Jalen Gaffney, a former UConn player, is back. Some of these guys, like, their stats show that they were role players, but if you really watch the way that May deployed his roster and how he interchanged his guys, FAU had almost as much true depth as any team in the country because everyone really was so adaptable to a variety of different kind of roles, which made them so dangerous. And so the fact that you bring all of these guys back, it's going to be a collision between all of these expectations. You're not taking anyone by surprise anymore, right? So that is going to be there. They are going to play with the target in a way that I do think can have some impact. But I mean, GP, like they went the entire, like they had to a certain degree, they had this last season. They kept winning and winning and winning and winning. So do I think it's fair to expect a 30+ win season again? Personally, I don't think that's fair, but it would genuinely surprise me if FAU was not top 30 level wire to wire, and unless they had some injury stuff or stuff or something like that. But for background on this, here's what the previous teams that were quote unquote Cinderellas did the following year after making a Final Four. So keep this in mind. Mason, 2006. That's really the first one. Went 18-15 the next season, made the CAA title game, did not qualify for the NIT. Butler, of course, went in 2010, lost to Duke in the title game, made it back to the title game albeit as an 8 seed, but they did go back to the title game. So they're the best case scenario. If you're curious about, it's not really the pattern here, but the year after that, they did not make the tournament, but Brad Stevens had a good thing going there. Wichita State, maybe this is actually the best case scenario. Butler made a title game. Wichita State went 35-1. They had an undefeated regular season, lost in the second round to Kentucky in maybe a top 5 tournament game of the past decade. You had South Carolina in 2018. Just kidding. South Carolina. And then Loyola Chicago 2019 went 20-14, lost in the first round of the NIT as a 7 seed. So we have had some really good success stories. I think FAU will qualify in the success story category the year after making a Cinderella Final Four run.
That's all great info. The one I need to know is, tell me about Final Four teams that have returned all 5 starters. What do they do the next year?
I would imagine, since you had that curiosity, you've done all the exhaustive research and are about ready to inform our listeners of what you found.
I've done no research,
okay.
But because it just popped into my head, I might have tried to look it up or texted somebody and asked them to look it up for me if I'd have thought about it before. In all seriousness, it might be the Florida First National Championship team.
I wonder. Yeah,
and then they return all 5 starters, and I don't know if you heard what they did the next year, but same thing. They won the national championship again.
Yeah.
So what? Florida Atlantic, at worst case scenario, will be in the national semifinals, and from there we'll see.
That's true.
What history tells us is if you return all 5 starters from a Final Four team, you go back to the Final Four. Ask Al Horford.
I'd love to know the actual history of that. Let's just cut it off at the start of the 64 team field in 85. How many teams made a Final Four and then the subsequent year brought back their entire starting 5? Although, are we counting Forrest? Did Forrest not qualify as the starter here? Was he coming off the bench? He might have come off the bench.
I call starters people who start.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at Forrest's numbers here.
I don't know. Maybe I'm a basketball
game. What's crazy about Forrest here, real quick, because I don't know if I ever wound up writing too much about this last season. He, at one point in his career, was a starter, but it kind of spoke to his character and why this whole thing just worked last season as a unit, that he was willing to go from, prized recruit once upon a win that goes to FAU, picks to play for Dusty May at a time when the program obviously is just nothing notable whatsoever. And so he becomes a starter, is playing a good portion of minutes. And then eventually, he has a situation where other guys are recruited around him and they ask him to come off the bench, and he does it willingly and wantingly, like just really impressive, and stuff like that goes a long way to team chemistry and team balance. And yeah, as we mentioned on an earlier episode this offseason in the spring, I remember catching up with Dusty May. I guess it maybe would have been late April or early May. And he was recalling that when he went to the live period stuff to watch high school games in April, when he'd go in the gym and sit next to some coaches, the thing that coaches wanted to talk to him about or commend him on wasn't necessarily the Final Four run, as amazing that was. It was these guys that either themselves or their assistants or colleagues or whatever are looking in the portal daily by the hour, and they're going, give me your secrets. I got to know, man. How the hell at Florida Atlantic did you just make the Final Four, and you're telling me you didn't lose one dude in the portal? How did you didn't lose your 9th guy? How did you do this? So it is rare. It's impressive. And May and those players should really be commended, in my opinion, for doing this. Now, it doesn't necessarily make it wrong for anyone that wants to go in the portal, but it's a rare thing, man. And for them to have been able to do this, because while these FAU players are getting good NIL deals, it's not like no one on this roster is making, $500,000 in NIL money. That's not happening. And not to say that Elijah Martin could have 100% commanded that, but I'll tell you this, guys who are less accomplished and maybe less known than Elijah Martin have gone in the portal and had a representative seek out other schools and be like, my guy wants $350,000. That definitely does happen. Whether those players actually get that money is a whole different story, but it does happen. It wasn't the case here. And because of that, it's why FAU, again, GP's got this team 4th. When I do my top 101 in October, I'm not going to put FAU top 5 because I just can't get there. They had a really good season last season. They did finish 17 at Ken Palm. I will consider them for top 10 status. I'm just not quite sure yet. I got to try and balance what they are versus an upgrade in conference and what they got on the non-con slate and all that stuff.
I don't mean to come across as a basketball traditionalist, but I tend to call people who start starters.
I was checking.
Like you have to start.
Yeah. Well, he was a former starter, so.
Yeah, so was I. Okay.
Not in basketball.
We are.
I don't think that ever happened.
We're all former starters. All right.
Let me run down the schedule here. Okay.
Let's not just while you're running down one thing.
Yes.
The answer to the question these coaches are asking Dusty, how did you hold this thing together after a Final Four? I think he held it together because of a Final Four. Like, I think isn't that the biggest part of it? Like, you can really rally everybody and say, we just made history. We can do it again. Let's go do it again. Let's stick together. I'm with you. I could leave. I know you guys could leave. I know you could go to a bigger program. So could I. Why don't we all stick it out right here for a minute? See if we can do this again. I think that I don't want to say that would work everywhere. And I don't want to say it's not impressive because it clearly is. But that's got to be the message, right? And if it were a message that my coach, who I loved, was delivering to me in that moment, I would have had a hard time leaving too. I would have said, yeah, coach, let's run this back.
Yeah, and by the way, this is something that these guys will dine out together on for decades to come. And no matter what happens or doesn't happen this season, this is going to be a thing where they, whether Dusty May coaches for 1 more year or 10 more years at FAU, whatever it is, that team, that coaching staff, they're forever memorialized and remembered and lauded and celebrated in that area as they should be. And it's something that they can all hold on to.
They will none of these guys, I don't believe. None of these guys will ever regret staying. Yeah. If they would have left, they would have regretted it someday. They just would have.
Very strong possibility. All right, let's go regular season win total here. Here's what FAU's got all but 2 games done at this point. The 2 games they're working on apparently are around Christmas time. And I guess they both might be of decent variety, but we don't know the opponents. I do wonder, there was talk about an Arizona matchup on a neutral, and I think that might have waned at a certain point. I wonder if it still might be achievable or not. But if not, they're working on 2 games that I don't believe are bye game level. So keep that in mind. We are missing 2 pieces of data. Otherwise, though, it's actually a pretty solid non-con for FAU. Open the season on a neutral against Loyola Chicago. Then they'll play Eastern Michigan and Bryan at home. Then they're in the ESPN Invitational. Now, we don't have the matchups on that yet, but here are the other 7 teams in that. Boise State, Butler, Iowa State, Penn State, Texas A&M, VCU, and Virginia Tech. Complete side note, that's got Penn State and VCU in that. I would imagine those teams will be on separate portions of the bracket because VCU's old coach is Penn State's new coach. But Boise, FAU is in that. They'll play 3 of those teams. Then they've got shouts to our friends at Field of 68. They are sponsoring a 3-team MTE, I guess, and FAU is hosting it. And the 3 teams are FAU, Liberty, and Charleston. So those teams will all play each other. Liberty first, and then Charleston for FAU on November 30th and December 2nd. Then this is what a Final Four run can do for you. FAU's in the Jimmy V Classic. They're going to play Illinois at MSG on December 5th. They'll host FIU as usual. They'll play St. Bonaventure in the Hall of Fame event, and then they are moving to the American. So all that considered, I think I know where you're going with this. I tried to dial back the expectations just a little bit. The conference, CUSA was solid last year. The American is going down in quality, but overall it is an upgrade in conference. They are going to make the jump into the American, and the non-conference schedule has plenty of challenges, and they'll probably play at least 1 more team that's of top 40 variety. So keep that in mind as well, GP. With that being said, regular season, 31-game slate. I am actually going to set the over-under for FAU at 22.5 wins. Where are you going?
Oh, I'm soaring over that.
Soaring like an owl.
Soaring like an owl. How do owls fly? Like this?
With their wings.
Yeah. Look at me. I'm soaring like an owl.
There you go. Yeah, bringing it back.
I'm soaring like an owl straight over that total number. Are you out of your mind?
Your eyes like an owl.
22 and a half? That's disrespectful.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe it is.
That's the most disrespectful stuff I've heard all week.
I'm motivating the entire team. I'm sure I'm down to the last guy on the end of the bench listening to this episode.
I mean, this is Florida Atlantic.
It is. FAU.
22 and a half.
Boca Raton.
That's the most disrespectful thing I've ever heard. You call Dusty May your friend, and then you disrespect him like that.
I call him a dedicated listener to the podcast.
I hope he's my friend.
He's not. In fact, we have already established that. We have already established that's the case. He is not.
I believe in Dusty May more than you believe
You're
in
trying
Dusty
to
May.
rewrite history. You're trying to rewrite history. We all know. You've besmirched the name of FAU multiple times over the year.
He's going to be amazing at Indiana. Like, I believe in him.
I actually done. That's going to be if that ever happens. I don't know how you're going to actually that fits perfectly. Because you have downplayed Dusty May's program for years, and then him going to Indiana would only be perfect, wouldn't it?
I'm never going to say another Indiana coach is going to be amazing. I'm done predicting. I'm done predicting amazing things for that place.
All right, how many? What's FAU's regular season record?
I'm flying over the over. Okay, they're going to lose 2 non-league games, and people are going to freak out.
I'm flying over the Atlantic.
They're going to lose 2. Look at me. I think I would be good at flying.
Ridiculous. Okay. That I think you've gone from the out of the pop and lock. I think that's what you started doing.
I'm like that thing in front of a car lot, that blows up.
Yes,
That's what I'm not even an owl.
You got to get your.
I'm basically at a car lot. Yes. I think I'm an owl.
Super inflatable, man.
I think I'm an owl, but I'm really the thing at the car lot.
Oh my gosh!
Life
What's
is
the record
confusing.
going to be?
2 non-league losses, and people are going to freak out, and they're going to be dumb. And then I'm going to give them 3 league losses.
Wow!
So they're going to be AAC champions. Although, like, if you realize at this point, if Memphis gets DeAndre Williams eligible, Memphis will be ahead of Florida Atlantic preseason at barttorvik.com.
Well, you got a situation to figure out there.
They got a roster tool over there at barttorvik.com. If you add DeAndre Williams to the current roster, even if you take Mikey Williams out because he allegedly fired a gun into a car filled with people, Memphis is 9th in the country at that point, according to barttorvik.com. I still think I will still have Florida Atlantic picked to win the AAC no matter what. So 2 non-league losses, 3 league losses, 31 minus 5. 26 wins heading into the AAC tournament.
Nada, can you remember off the top of your head? We just did the Duke episode. So does that mean GP's highest win total so far in this series did Duke also get 26 wins?
I think Creighton got 26.
Duke and Creighton both got 26.
There we go. Okay.
I'm just like a terrible gambler taking the overs everywhere.
You are. I know I'm trying to be pragmatic about this and be as accurate as possible.
I'm trying to be.
Parrish is just trying to
piss
off fan bases. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, I just want people to like me at this point.
You got to stand up for your principles and what you believe in, not be afraid by the.
I believe in wanting people to like me.
I'm going to say one of the 2 games that we don't know about will be a quality opponent, and I'm going to mark that down for a loss. I think that FAU will take at least 1 loss in the ESPN Invitational, so that's 2. Call Illinois maybe 3. So I'll say 3 non-league losses. And then, the American is an upgrade, and the travel is also like that league is one of the more difficult travel leagues in the country because of how the schedule breaks down. I got them losing 5 in league play, which isn't that bad. So I've got FAU at 23-8 this upcoming season and easily clearing it back into the NCAAs. What would be hilarious is if they get in at 23-8 and wind up with a 9 seed a year after a 3-loss team out of CUSA got a 9 seed. We know how that can go. But our hopes are both high. GP's got them top 5. I would expect I'll have them somewhere in the top 15.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for listening, watching Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. Rate it, review it. Leave a comment. There's more of us than there are of them. That needs to be reflected in those comments. Thank you in advance if you're about to do it. If you've already done it, we owe you forever. Oh, we got what we got coming up next. What's next? 2 more episodes.
2 more episodes.
I believe, if my alphabetical order is correct.
Yes.
One will be on Gonzaga.
Yes.
And the other will be on Kelvin Sampson's Houston Cougars.
Nailed it.
I can't wait. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.